Thanks, Chris. Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to CIO Leadership Live. I'm your host, Mary Fran Johnson, CEO of Mary Fran Johnson Media, and a contributing columnist on CIO.com, where I write about boardroom issues for technology leaders. Twice a month, we produce this video show and podcast to stream live to you on LinkedIn and onto IDG's Tech Talk channel on YouTube. Today's episode is sponsored by Cisco, the worldwide leader in technology that powers the internet. Cisco is out there inspiring new possibilities by reimagining your applications, securing your data, transforming your infrastructure, and empowering your teams for the future. Learn more about what they're up to at newsroom.cisco.com. And we welcome all of our viewers today to join in the conversation with questions of your own. We'll be watching for those on both LinkedIn and YouTube and doing our best to pass them along to today's guest, who I'm quite delighted to have with us here this afternoon. Mojgan Lefebvre is Executive Vice President and Chief Technology and Operations Officer for Travelers. As the only property and casualty insurer listed in the Dow 30, Travelers has $33 billion in annual revenues, 30,000 employees, and 13,500 independent agents and brokers working across the US, Canada, United Kingdom, and Ireland. Mojgan joined the company in 2018 in a unique leadership role that oversees all aspects of technology and data strategy, cybersecurity, insurance operations functions, and omni-channel customer engagement. Under her leadership, Travelers has been winning national innovation awards, including two of our own CIO 100 Innovation Awards last year in 2020 and again this year. Most recently, she was named to the new Forbes CIO Next list as one of the 50 most innovative technology leaders. Before she joined Travelers, Mojgan was the CIO for Liberty Mutual's Global Risk Solutions and a guest star here on CIO Leadership Live during our very first season. She's also held a number of senior business and technology leadership roles across financial, high-tech, and biomedical industries. Mojgan, welcome back. It's so good to see you again.
Hi, Mary Fran. Wonderful to see you, and I wish I were with you in person.
Yes, well, we're all getting to that soon. So the world is starting to open up again. And for a massive extrovert like myself, I'm so busy making lunch dates with people. I'll drive to Hartford. We can have lunch. Let's start out. I like to start at that 30,000 foot view, talking about the impact of the last year and a half and all that we've been through in this pandemic year and the effect on travelers, customers, and also employees. Tell me how things have been going for all of you.
So, surprisingly, it feels like, wow, we have done so much and we didn't miss a beat. And let me start by saying it all goes to the core of who we are as an organization and who we've been over the past 160 plus years. It's all about delivering the traveler's promise, making sure that we're taking care of our customers, our employees, our partners, and our communities. And our reaction throughout the past year and a half has been nothing short of that.
Yeah.
I'd say as an industry in general, we decided that addressing the financial needs and the well-being of our customers and partners was key and top of the list.
Yeah.
So creating lenient payment arrangements was a part of what we saw across many of the prominent players in this, including ourselves.
Yes.
One of the benefits, of course, early on, as we all remember, in the beginning, like 16 or so months ago, was the fact that, of course, because people were driving far less, or there were far fewer people driving, that generally there were a lower frequency of claims. And so as a result, this allowed us to provide even more or to lean into that leniency. And so we provided a 15% credit on auto premiums, and we did that for 3 months last year. So that was on the kind of customer side. Of course, on the employee side, that was top of mind for us. And I remember it was literally probably on the 12th or 13th of March that we decided we probably had no choice but to go fully remote. And on March 16th, we were fully remote. What went into that from the technology organization was an a huge amount of effort, which of course there was a lot of preparation built into, but
Sure.
enable that was just incredible, and do it in a way where it was secure and our people had the tools they needed to get to. And
Mhm.
so that was on the employee side. And then I would say, last but certainly not least, our ability to show up digitally and virtually for our customers was probably key and core to how we've been able to operate as a business over the past year and a half.
Well, and one of the, I think, most enjoyable business effects watching through this entire year and a half has been how much all of that digital transformation work or the digital journey work, it's called so many different things at different companies, all of the work that CTOs and CIOs like yourself have been doing over the last 3 to 5 years, how much that has paid off for everybody. And but when one of the questions I've been asking is around the focus of that approach to digital, the customer facing technologies. I know your recent CIO 100 award certainly recognized the digital journey you've been on, and all of the people at Travelers have been on, and how much of a difference that made. Tell me a little bit more about that, thinking about in the context of the last year and a half.
So we had a very explicit strategy in place that, of course, ensured that we continue to perform as a company, because our viability as a business is what affords us all to be around, and yet very much also accepting the fact that technology and many things around us are changing at an unprecedented pace, and we need to ensure that we have a transform agenda that's couched in three areas.
Mm-hmm.
Continuing to advance our risk expertise, which is at the core of what we do as an insurance organization.
Right.
But then also ensure that we're creating great experiences, customer centricity,
Mm-hmm.
really becoming a key part of what insurers, in the past may not have been paying attention to, but understanding that companies like Amazon and Google and Netflix and others have just
Mm-hmm.
instilled in every consumer the expectation that they are at the core of everything, and they want things to show up digitally, to be seamless, and to be easy for them. And then,
Yes.
of course, a drive toward productivity and efficiency. And I'd say technology and data are core to each of these three areas. So the
Mm-hmm.
investments that we had put in place were already occurring, and to make sure that we're advancing here. What happened with the everyone going home and not having the ability to physically show up was the adoption rate. So we weren't like some other industries where they hadn't made the investments. We had absolutely, and not only as an industry, as a company, made those choices, but it was the adoption rate that we suddenly saw go through the roof. And so there are three areas that I'll highlight for you.
Okay.
One is in the world of claim. And of course, as you can imagine, that's where, that's really probably the biggest interaction where the customer truly experiences their insurance company and how much they take care of them. And so during the pandemic, the use of our virtual claim handling tools went up in a huge way. Over 70% of our auto and property claims were using these tools. So it could be anything from taking a photo and sending it in, and our estimating capabilities that allowed us to do things virtually, to leveraging the video inspection process for evaluating the interior of properties, something like a FaceTime-like app that we could have our customers work with our claim professionals and really do a real-time inspection. And so
Yeah.
we just saw that number shoot up, and we logged tens of thousands of hours of that kind of
Mm-hmm.
interaction. In the workers' comp side of things, similar thing again with the virtual visit capabilities
Yeah.
with our nurses and medical case managers. And I know you've had folks in on the telemedicine side of things, and I'd say that certainly also was something that an experience that we started to leverage a lot, between providing that virtual interaction between our claimants, customers, and third-party medical providers.
Mm-hmm.
These are things that just shot up in a huge way, Mary Fran. Like numbers like we have 40 times as much of those interactions in the telemedicine side as we had prior. And these are things that we think are going to go back. They, I think, have forever changed that interaction. So that's on the claim side.
Mm-hmm.
On the service side, where we have a lot of people who just call in and ask some simple questions and so on, we had in 2020 launched our virtual assistant solution, which is an
Yes.
AI-based solution that really attempts to answer a lot of simple questions that people may call in. So we want to make sure we're not really taking up the valuable time of our operations professionals.
Mm-hmm.
And as the pandemic started, there was a huge number of questions that started coming in, and so we hadn't necessarily picked up on that, and so that's where the machine learning suddenly started to see a trend in the data of the types of questions that were getting asked, and so we leveraged that opportunity to train our model to see what some of those categories of questions were and the answers. And so, given the way AI works with the larger volume, our model became much more accurate, and so we just shot up again. We saw the increase in the number of engagements and the correctness of the answers that were coming back from
Yes.
the machine in that case.
I remember talking to you about that early on, and it had gone up. It was initially it started out about 50 or so percent were really accurate, and within a couple of weeks, you were up in the 80s and 90s in terms
Yeah.
of the accuracy. And I love examples like that because they show how much benefit AI embedded in various data responses and in some of these digital capabilities, how much people probably don't even realize how much it's helping.
Absolutely. And it's again, machine learning is all about learning, which is why also the quality of the data that goes in,
That's
ensuring
a great
that,
point.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that you've got both a holistic view into the data, and you've got the right type of data is important. And so again, the more volume you have, the more opportunity there is for
Yeah.
that to get better.
Well, one of the things you said recently that has just stuck in my head that you're not just using technology to build things. It's actually also about design thinking and taking this thoughtful approach and agile ways of working and that sort of thing. And I love that thought because it just expresses so much about the breadth of responsibilities in the way technology and operations organizations like yours are delivering for their businesses. Talk about when you say that we don't just use technology to build things, but tell me that story. What do you mean when you say that?
I mean, there's so much temptation to just get enamored with the technology itself and just, think of just examples of things that you build. But we start everything hand in hand with our business, focusing on business outcomes
Right.
and what outcomes it is, the outcomes and the key results that we want to achieve. A couple of years ago, we drove toward setting up our teams as, and by our teams I mean our business teams and our technology professionals, into product teams that
Yes.
sit together in pods that have a very specific set of outcomes they are focused on, which are very aligned to our business strategies across our three business segments and our claim function.
Yeah.
And so, starting from those business outcomes, defining how we would measure the success of those outcomes is how the groups start, and then building capabilities and solutions couched in technology and data that drive towards those outcomes, Mary Fran, and really having that customer centricity perspective, but also understanding the value of building things iteratively from starting with the outcome on what the customer wants, what the stakeholder that you're building for wants,
Mm-hmm.
then building building the capabilities from there, putting it in the hands of the user, getting the feedback, and that iterative approach is how your solution continues to get better. And
Yes.
that's really what's at the core of Agile. It's customer centricity, an iterative approach, and that continuous feedback loop. And
Yeah.
then as you're approaching building these solutions, as what you said, it's ensuring that it's desirable, which of course, if it's customer centric, and you're getting that feedback that happens all the time, that it's viable, that there's a business case around it, that some things may not be affordable, and then of course it's feasible, it's technologically feasible. So
Mm-hmm.
design thinking at the core of what we do. So elements and principles of agile and design thinking, and really how engineering organizations work, where
Hmm.
everything about the customer, the user at the center is what has gone into it. And the teams being small teams, as Amazon calls them, two pizza teams, right? Two pizza
Right,
stations,
I've heard that. Hmm.
small teams that work together, sit together, are one team. They may come from different parts of the organization, but
Yes.
they work together, and those are the teams. And the teams spend the majority of the time together, whether physically or, of course, now over the past year and a half, virtually,
Hmm.
and do the work. So those are some of the elements, Mary Fran, and it's a journey. We
Yes.
launched this agile transformation in a big way with our business. I mean, our technology teams had been operating in that way for a while, but by
Right.
definition, because we didn't have the business people in it, we weren't cross-functional. And so
Yeah.
the core of what's at the heart of agile wasn't necessarily fully in it. And so bringing our business into it was really a big step. And incredibly enough, as we launched into that journey, we all went home. And so
I
we
know.
a lot of it virtually.
Well, and I was thinking of that. I remember in the early months of everyone working from home, there was that question that arose about what's going to happen to all those agile ways of doing business. And I think and nobody seemed to miss, nobody I've talked to really missed a beat. And it turns out, and it's such a great way, I think, for business people to learn more about technology, to be able to speak in some of that language, and for the technology experts to learn so much about what the business is doing. It's so practical and grounded. And the fact that so many organizations like yours really didn't miss a beat is I think one of the unsung heroic miracles of the last year and a half. Related to that, at first I was calling these return to work strategies, but I had to correct myself because nobody missed a beat on working. So returning to offices and buildings and the hybrid workplace. As before we got on this call, we were talking about how much that's being essentially flogged around in the media right now. Everybody's interested in this because, of course, it affects everybody. They want to know what's that company down the street doing, that sort of thing. So tell me about how you and Travelers and the leadership team there have been thinking about that hybrid workplace and your plans for the rest of 2021.
Yeah, great question, Mary Fran. Look, I would say many companies were able to leverage digital and technology and not miss a beat. And yet I'd say
Mhm.
we were probably pulling from the incredible deep relationships that we've built over the years.
Yes.
And there is no doubt in my mind that human connection is absolutely core. And you're right, by the way, connecting it
Mhm.
to the last question of Agile, one of the tenets of Agile was always co-location. I
In the
remember
room, right? Yeah.
absolutely, like being together, the ability to see each other, the ability to have conversations. And I think that is absolutely still true. And I'd say technology is not yet there to give you that full experience.
Yeah.
It'll probably come, but I don't know if I'll be able to. Probably sooner than we think, and later than many might claim. Again, so hybrid therefore is at the core of what we've decided as an organization.
Of
We, of
course.
course, wanted to make sure we leveraged a lot of the incredible learnings that we had over the last year and a half, of where, as we talked about it, we learned how tools and virtual and technology capabilities can help you do many things where you don't necessarily need to be together. And yet,
Yeah.
over the last 160 years before, we have learned how, as an organization, everything around being together and those experiences that you create, where whether it's about running into each other at the proverbial water cooler or the cafeteria, or actually planned get-togethers where you get to do whiteboarding, but much more
Mhm.
dynamically than something that you can do, of course. And there are many tools out there that let you do that, but that
Yeah.
real ability to have working sessions. And so I think when it comes to innovation and transformational efforts, it'll be important to bring that back. And so
Yeah.
really asking everyone that, giving them the option of having some remote work, and which
Mhm.
we didn't really have before, except in very small pockets, but having this as an option across the enterprise, and ensuring also that we show up and that we are together, and we give the opportunity to the hundreds of employees that we've hired over the past year and a half, some of whom haven't even met the people that
I was
they've
I
worked
was
with.
just thinking of that. You hired several hundred new data and software engineers and people that probably have they seen you face to face yet? Have you had a chance to meet any of them in person?
Not yet, not
Not
yet.
yet. We're getting
I,
there.
I was actually in our Hartford offices the first couple of days this week, and so I walked around, and we still we had started this renewal of our buildings a while ago, and we're just they're coming to an end, and we've got some incredible spaces where, speaking of the return to office, another core part is that we had started creating a lot of collaboration spaces. Obviously, we're going to be very aware and continue to be very aware of CDC guidelines and ensuring we
Of
keep
course.
all of that in mind and pivot as necessary. But we're getting
Hmm.
ready for having many of our associates back together and in the spaces that we have. I'd say the other result of this past year and a half was the fact that we learned how important it is to have the ability to have hybrid meetings where the experience,
Yeah.
both those in the rooms and those remote, is as good and on equal footing. And I'd say that's a big change from what might have been in place in the past, where it was all about who was in the room.
Oh, for sure. I had a very interesting conversation with the CIO of the Washington Post in one of our other IDG events, and he was calling it the democratization of these meetings where you have some people on the screens and other people there. And he was looking at some emerging technologies where everybody was essentially on a screen, even if they were at the table. And he was looking at a variety of things. And I thought how interesting that is, because over the years, everybody remembers that gray speaker phone in the middle of the table, and the people who were disadvantaged and had to call into the meeting could never quite hear, and they didn't know how to interrupt the meeting. It's not, I think, just a technology solution. It's actually going to change the way some organizations think ahead about how we're going to run our meetings. I think that there's all kinds of interesting stuff around that coming up.
And it's always more about the human behavior and the
Isn't
process
it?
for
Yeah,
before the technology, because the technology is not going to solve the fact that if you set up a meeting, you forgot to set up that virtual link.
that's right.
So really, some of the basic things to say, as we start to go back, and as we have started to go back, ensuring every meeting both has a physical and a virtual place, ensuring that the quality of the sound through the microphones is as good in the rooms as it is remotely. And it's not going to be easy, because some of the technologies, again, by the way, still need a lot of work. And
Oh, yeah.
as much of the hard work it was for our infrastructure and network teams to ensure that as we went, we all went home, that
Yeah.
that worked well. That they've done a huge amount of work to ensure that we're ready for the return, and
Yep.
we're gonna keep our eyes open, and then I'm sure gonna learn and get better and better at it.
You're going to stay flexible. Nobody gets to kick back and say, "Okay, job done." I mean, but that's always the way it is, isn't it? With digital, any kind of transformative digital work, it's like it's all so iterative. Sometimes I get frustrated with it. Everybody says, "Oh, it's a journey," and I keep saying, "Do we ever get to the destination?" But I think with digital technologies, you really don't. It's just the destination ends up being paying attention to all the feedback that you're having now and then reacting to it, especially when you're thinking, so much in a customer centric way, as you've always done. I mean, even in your previous career, I know we've talked in previous years, and this has been a lifelong kind of interest of yours, that customer and business focus. Let's pivot over to talking about some of your top business and technology initiatives, and I know they're very much intertwined with each other. As we head into the rest of this year, what kind of things are top of mind for you that we haven't already touched on, of course, and for the entire organization?
So again, starting with the business strategies, of course, being first, because again,
Yep.
it is about prioritization. You can't keep up with every technology that's happening and just keep building things, kind of like going back to that expression of, we're not just building things, but really prioritizing based on business needs, but
Mm-hmm.
also understanding that some things will depend on a set of platforms that will enable and will have to be built at the center. And so as you start out with the business outcomes and with the experiences that you prioritize, ensuring that you're keeping that in mind. And so this has enabled us to really group our efforts from a technology perspective in a few areas. And I'd say first and foremost, it's talent, Mary Fran. So like our focus on talent, the fact that engineering and really deep technical understanding married with that business understanding is core to everything we do. But having those deep engineers have the ability to sit in those teams with our business people and work together and design and build and show and pivot. So a focus on talent, both recruiting, as I've talked about before, but also continuing to upskill and reskill as needed, whether it's reskilling from some of the older settings of like some of the folks that we have working in mainframe environments on newer skill sets to moving to the cloud and other things. To then, of course, as I said, continuing to ensure that everyone understands the agile ways of working and the ability to prioritize, make decisions, create backlogs, and put things into market. Yeah. And then I'd say, thirdly, there's a huge effort that we have around simplifying and modernizing. As a company for whom information and data are at the core, and systems and automation has been a key part. We don't manufacture gadgets. Everything we do based on information, and from our risk expertise to experiences we create. So we've got years of things that we have built. And so again, in a prioritized order, we have absolutely started to modernize a lot of things. And that requires a lot of effort. And there are areas where we may have had a lot of technical debt and probably continue to do so. And really working through, how do we drive towards those common extensible set of capabilities built on microservices, really API enabled, to allow us to connect to these newer ecosystems where our customers expect us to show us. It's not always about them coming to us as an insurance organization, but we need to be embedded in other experiences where insurance becomes more and more part of some of the business that they do. When they buy something, the ability to have the warranty or the insurance that goes with it, as I'm sure many of us have experienced, when you buy your iPhone and things like that. So those are a few areas that we're very much focused on. And then, of course, continuing to absolutely ensure that we're advancing in areas of analytics and AI, because we know that that's going to make a big difference from how we interact with our customers, whether it's guiding our operations professionals on what are the next best set of questions to ask, or how to categorize the customer who's calling in, or ensure that they've got visibility, a 360 view of the customer who's calling, and all the interactions we have with them. So these are all the areas where we really think are key areas we're focusing on.
Excellent. Well, we had a question from our alert listeners, and this actually would loop us back a little bit to talk about the virtual meetings. And you had mentioned that, there's more attention being paid to audio, and that people will have to do things like include links. And you mentioned collaboration spaces. What are some of the key changes that you feel like you as an organization are making to kind of fix that issue about people virtually not feeling like they're part of the gang in the room? I've been waiting for that Star Trek technology where we can have 3D holographs. You're probably not investing in those. I'm not sure they actually exist yet, but
not in those, but technologies which, like, one of them we're using, right? So from leveraging Zoom to video conferencing capabilities, to where we yesterday were in meetings where within the room there were multiple screens that were set up, and some of them were projecting the presentations or the demos that we were looking at, and others were projecting the screen similar to what we see on the laptop, but these were on screens around the room. And so as we talked to folks, both those in the room where could hear and participate, and those on the screen, and we have a whole team that's been working diligently over the past 6 months. Again, it's a cross-functional team made up of some of our operations folks, of course, our technology folks,
Of course.
especially from the audio visual side of things, and
Hmm.
then some of our business teams who really have been paying attention to everything from, as we come back, what are the tools that we want to make sure people have still at their home when they're working
Hmm.
remotely, and how we provide similar sets of tools in the offices as well, and that they're as standard as possible. We've got folks who are going around and testing things out, and then we also have a set of guidelines that we've provided, and so to those setting up the meetings, like best practices, and really making sure that we're approaching this as an initiative and a project. And again, we
Yes.
also want to make sure people are patient. They provide as much feedback.
Hmm.
So those are a few things we've done.
Good. Those
One
are
of the first meetings, Mary Fran, where we and I happened to actually be remote in that meeting, and some of my colleagues were in person, and the sound quality, there was a lot of feedback, and so that was feedback that I provided to our audiovisual team, and so they've
good.
gone around and tested all the mics and everything like that. So these are things that will continue to just get better.
That's great. That's great. Well, and you've often spoken when we've talked in the past about the importance of fostering a strong learning and data culture. And I think we're all getting so much more familiar with all the different ways that data is part of our lives. Tell me more about that. I know that it kind of ties into questions about the hybrid office and the work culture and how things may have changed during the last year and a half. But if you've got a strong learning and data culture, you've got ways to deal with it. So tell me about some of your thoughts on that.
So I would say couched deeply in how we're investing in our people and our focus on talent is that making sure people have the right skill sets. And for a company for whom data is at the core of everything we do, and every person in their role is creating data, whether they're aware of it or not, was something that we focused on in a big way. And as we brought on our leader for data in the organization, we decided that really ensuring that regardless of what your role is, whether you're part of the claim organization or the service
Hmm.
organization or an underwriter, really understanding the meaning of data, and then having a map of how data from the moment you start a conversation with the customer to how that data travels through some of our systems and gets manipulated, to how it comes back and plays a role in the next conversation you have with the customer. And that if the quality of the data weren't as good, or if the data weren't as holistic as it needs to be, it can really get in the way, or it won't have as much potential as it could have, for that to become more and more clear. So our
Yeah.
teams created these incredible, what we call data knowledge maps, that we have started as part of a series of trainings and learnings, some of which were in person and many of which have become online, where we have driven towards educating every single of our 30,000 employees in this. And now we're about a third so through the organization. And the organization has truly embraced this, understanding that data is, again, the raw materials, which then turns into useful information, and then the process and the changes that that information can go through to create insights, whether it's for the underwriter as they're doing the pricing, insights about the customer so that they price that risk the right way, or as claims come in, which ones are the right one based on insights that the claim professional has to allow that to go through straight through processing and go straight through versus spending a lot more time on.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things that in our data culture and the learning culture we're bringing to the forefront. And
Well,
of course, there are other elements to the learning as well.
oh, of course. Well, and I believe one of the stories that I was working on recently, and I interviewed one of your communications and your data, one of your data leaders, and they shared with me one of those the map, and it was not gamified, but it was a beautiful color. It was like little people that were. It was the first time I actually understood data flow throughout your whole organization, and that was only for just one application or something along those lines. And for some of us who would rather learn through cartoon illustrations, I thought that that was incredibly clever. I'm sorry I don't have it with me. I could hold it up on screen and say, look how cute this is. But the underlying importance of it was how well it communicated literally in a glance about all of the complex areas where data may land.
Absolutely. And we really leveraged those and had them customized for each area
Yeah,
by the area to make
great.
sure that it really was couched in specific use cases that made a lot of sense to the people going through it.
Well, and the editor in me hears about things like that and wants to know if you're planning to publish a little graphic novel that you could include all of these in. There's an idea. Let me see. I want to also let me ask if on your own CTO of this enormous organization, your list of strategic priorities, is there anything we haven't touched on yet that has kind of shifted higher up your list? Or is everything always in a state of motion? Sometimes that's, in the early days of the last March and April and May, we talked a lot about collaboration technologies, and they were very important suddenly to everybody. But, now that we're a year and a half into the remote working situations and all, is there anything that you find higher on your list of strategic priorities these days?
I think so. So funny enough, it kind of leans back into the word culture, Mary Fran, and
Okay.
actually it's really how we show up. Every single individual, how they show up, how they act, and how they behave,
Mm-hmm.
and everything we talked about, whether it's about building things as an engineer in the new way, whether it's cloud-based, microservices-based, or other, or thinking about things from the perspective of the customer and the user first,
Yeah.
or thinking about data right up front before you even put a word of code, and so that data is not an
Mm-hmm.
afterthought, to how you use data in every conversation you have. I say all of that is really about the mindset and the culture. And for a company that's been around for a long time, you can imagine that we have a strong culture, and it's an incredibly powerful one that has allowed us to be who we are. And yet we're also very focused on, how do we continue to evolve? And especially on the technology and operations side, there are a few elements of those cultures that we want to highlight because they're going to allow us to do a lot of what we want to do, whether it's innovation or tech modernization and getting rid of technical debt much more easily.
Mm-hmm.
And the way we've been talking about it, and so we have a group of employees, and this kind of got born as we started to discuss it among the employees themselves, who've called themselves the Culture Club, a much point after the famous Breakfast Club, for those of us who are old enough to
Okay.
know
Yes.
what it is. And they're really focused on saying, how do we make sure that customer centricity,
Mm-hmm.
having empowered teams that are autonomous and yet aligned, so empowered teams,
Mm-hmm.
the ability to prioritize because we have so much coming at us. And then
Yes.
finally, that learning culture we talked about, test and
Mm-hmm.
learn. So these four elements are a core part of who we are and how we operate, and really moving from wanting to do everything to really prioritizing from
Yes.
where we are collaborative, and that's phenomenal, but sometimes we can do that at a fault. And so
Mm-hmm.
ensuring that we give our teams the autonomy to make decisions, empowering them to do
Mm-hmm.
so. And so those are some of the evolutions that we think are important. And I'd say that's, for me, that's top of mind because that's the foundation of a lot of what we do. And we have our strategy,
Mm-hmm.
but strategy alone won't result in those business outcomes.
Yeah.
Really, strategy plus culture. And so I'd say the culture piece is the one that's really top of mind.
Well, and I don't know how many over the years, how many probably very highly paid consultants have told CIOs very firmly, they've said, well, culture eats strategy for lunch, in that warning tone that they would like to use, that is basically like if your people are not with you on any given strategy, the strategy isn't going to matter. a whole lot. And I think that we've seen that kind of live out in real action time during the past year and a half. We have a question from our audience, and this is actually, and I'm so grateful that you're such a technology and business steeped CTO. This viewer would like you to talk about how you're leveraging Internet of Things, or IoT, in the underwriting and claims processing. And there was, previous to that, there was also a question about robotic process automation, the RPA. So there's some interest in how these very modern technologies are already being leveraged. So if there's anything you could tell us about that.
Absolutely. So from an RPA, so let me start with like the basics of RPA, which, RPA is funny because it's one of those things that's been around for a long time, right? At the core of it, it's about a lot of batch processing that can happen, from screen scraping to a lot of automation and so on. And true that, done at scale, that has made a big difference. And I would say along the lines of our claim processes, that's what we've leveraged quite a bit to automate things that were repeatable processes, where we could actually teach the robots to do that multiple times. And we've got, over 40 or so processes along the claim process that have leveraged this in a big way, and have extended that into other parts of our function. And so I'd say in the continuum of AI, RPA is probably kind of at the lower end of where a lot of companies start. I remember Tom Davenport in a conversation I was having with him, and he's usually touted as the father of AI, and he said, if you want to start with AI, start with robotic process automation, RPA. And there are many players out there, from Automation Anywhere to Blue Prism to other things that you can start with. So that's on the RPA side, for sure. You've got to pay a lot of attention with RPA, though, to the continuum of processes, because again, if something upfront breaks, it can have impacts down the road. So those are some of the learnings that a lot of companies, as they've implemented RPA, have done. And then I think the other question was the Internet of Things.
IoT. And I tend to think of IoT as devices that are attached to things like sensors. But I know that IoT has a much broader impact.
Absolutely. And that's the kind of explosion of IoT and the number of sensors. Like, we've already seen an explosion of IoT, and as a result, data that emanates from these things, right? Whether it's our Apple Watch, right? From there to your phones, of course, and to many things, right? And so where we're already leveraging IoT, it's in our telematics program, and it's as we bring on our personal insurance customers. So as a consumer buys an auto policy, they've got the option to sign up with us, so that through their phone, and it used to, by the way, be through a dongle, and now it's moved on so that our program is through the phone for the first 90 days of their policy. They can sign up to have their driving behavior be evaluated, and if that behavior is a positive one, and in many cases it is, they actually get discounts. So of course it is an opt-in, and so that's just one example. And as vehicles start to have a lot of those capabilities, and I'd say I believe 30% or so of vehicles on the road in this day and age are connected. Actually, not as much of that connectivity is being leveraged as directly. Again, that's going to become more and more of where, both in the underwriting process and then also in the claim process, there will be more opportunities to leverage it. Imagine a day that you and I'm sure it's probably farther off than tomorrow, but it's not that far off, where
it might be in a year.
You get into your car, and on your phone, and you put in the destination, and through the integration of Google Maps and many other things, you not only get the destination you're going to, but you're told, hey, if you took that route, there's a lower chance of accidents. And then potentially your insurer can say, okay, if you don't take the route, then you're opting in for
more dangerous driving.
Like if something happens. And I'd say even the advent of insurance on demand, pay as you go, whatever you call it, right? Things like that are, by the way, out there, and that IoT can enable, are just some examples.
Excellent, excellent. So I'm sitting here and I'm just being feeling so grateful for your Georgia Institute of Technology background and all of that, because you could get down into the weeds with all of these technologies, which we will not do, but it's just it's great to know that. Let me see the. Let's talk a little bit too about, and we may have covered most of the changes in the company culture that you're really looking forward to keeping once we get more comfortable in the hybrid work culture. The sort of things, the way people's priorities kind of shuffled over the past year again with the kind of focus that you always have on customers first and employees and the collaboration that's kind of in your DNA. What are do you make a list to yourself of things we're definitely going to keep this, and this?
Absolutely, absolutely. There are four things that, as an organization, we know we want to keep and have been core to our success, and that's really it's the core of our culture. And by the way, I just want to emphasize the fact that the core of our culture and who we are, as a travelers and as a place, we refer to travelers as a place. Every single employee knows that word, and we want to keep. So if you ask any travelers employee what defines you, they'll say collaboration. And
Yeah.
we want to keep that, and that's something that has been core to our success. But as I said, we want to make sure while we are collaborative, we also have the ability to make decisions quickly enough and ensure
Yeah.
that people, we are empowering the right people to make the right decisions. So it's about collaboration. It's about long-term thinking. So despite being a Dow 30 public company, we're
Yes.
long-term thinkers. We're not just focused on the next quarter, because that wouldn't be how we've been so successful. And, as any company who's been around for 160 years have weathered at least a couple of financial crises.
Yes.
So it's long-term thinking. But then I would say putting the place first, as our CEO and chairman, Alan Schnitzer, says, and really thinking about travelers and the place. And that's where our technology and operations, common as possible, unique as necessary, goes. It's like thinking enterprise-wide and putting the place first, and then of course, last but certainly not least, being vested in everybody else's success. So I would say core to every single thing I said is that it's always about the bigger thing that we're about, and it's not about just me as an individual. It's about us, and it's about the place, and it's about our customers, our partners, and our communities.
Well, and the place used to refer, as you said, to specific places, to the office in Minneapolis or to the big gathering, the huge buildings in Hartford. But now the place is more all of travelers, isn't it? It's just there's a whole almost a I don't know what that is. It's more like a world view of the place as.
Yeah, and I would say the place has always been a larger, grander thing. It was about everything. I would say now the world has evolved where that's become maybe the reality, and that virtual the place kind of are getting closer, because now we can, through our tools, make the physical and the virtual come together, and it is about the grander travelers and the entirety of the place, and even the larger part of our ecosystems. It is about our customers and everything that we do. So that's how I think about it, Mary.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a particularly expansive and lovely way to think about it. I've got a question from our alert listeners about, and I think you'll love this one because it's about change management. And the question is, what is the biggest challenge when you're trying to change a culture? And, you're just trying to tweak it a little bit in one direction or another. And there's an example such as implementing new tools like technology tools for virtual calls and so forth. How do you use change management principles to make it work, to have it really kind of land with people?
Yeah, that's such an intuitive question, and such a fantastic question, because I would say the best execution will fail if that change management isn't there, and if people aren't coming with you. And what is core to every change management is communication, upfront, transparency, and involving the people who are part of that change, and ensuring that they own it and are part of it. So again, in everything, and that's where I would say the power of bringing different parts of your business along with your deep technologists together, so that together they're driving the change. It becomes important. And in everything we do, even in our implementation of Teams, for example, as a
Mhm.
collaborative tool, our communications organization is right there with our teams, and they are, the product owners, the team leaders, like the group that sits with our engineers who are doing that, and really defining the everything from the governance of the teams, of how many teams do we create, who's got the ability to have teams, so that it doesn't
Yeah.
become just a mess of stuff, right? That there that there truly is an architecture to it, a business architecture to it. So I'd say really communication, planning, ensuring you've got involvement, and probably again another core principle of Agile being dedicated resources, so that you don't have people doing 30 things, and they're
Mhm.
spending a little bit of time, and so having those dedicated teams focused on one or two key things that they're working on just becomes key
Yes.
to the change.
Well, and one of the things that I haven't asked you about yet, and I would feel so remiss if I didn't bring it up, is to talk a little bit about all the work that you have done, not just at Travelers, but I know over your career with diversity and inclusion and equity and bringing more women, more people of color into your technology organizations. I know you have a number, probably too many to mention, going on at Travelers, but I think it'd be great to land on that a little bit and talk about the kind of work that you have done, because you stand out in my mind often as one of those CTOs that has, it's not just a fashion with you. This is something you've been working on a lot over the years.
Well, thanks, Mary Fran. Look, as a woman in a field such as technology, where while the first computers were women, right? Like we've seen with all
Hidden figures, no more.
and
Yeah.
so on. And yet, as the field of computing became far more attractive, somehow our gender, started to lose ground. And so, I studied computer science as you said, at Georgia Tech, and so was keenly aware of that. And then, on top of it, as an immigrant, and really coming in, and so that element of ensuring that we have as many women of color, and people who are disadvantaged in everything we do. I know that that's been core to what I believe in, and I think actually it makes for better business, because
Yeah.
much like your models, your AI models learn from data. Like if your data is wrong, or if your data is biased, decisions are biased. It's the same for how we operate as humans. If you've got a team, all of whom are of the same mindset and have grown up the same way making decisions, their decisions will be very biased and not necessarily all in the right way. And over 50% of the world is made up of women. That's like a passion of mine, and I think
I
the
know.
number of women in the fields of STEM is not as high, and so I've been very, very focused in ensuring that we do something about that starting very early on. And so my involvement with Girls Who Code, Reshma Saujani's organization, and now with Tarika Barrett as the CEO of that organization, as Reshma has now become the chairman. That's
Mhm.
been something that's been a passion of mine. I've been a mentor to Girls Who Code for many years, and then last year we actually brought Girls to Code and one of their summer immersions into Travelers. A 7-week kind of physical internship became a 2-week virtual one, but my understanding is that actually what that has given Girls Who Code the ability to bring girls from all walks of life and are much more nationally together, and have even more diverse groups that can work together, and they're going to continue around that. So that's one of the many things
Any.
that we're doing
Mhm.
at Travelers. Among some other things, were a couple of years ago I started our Empower Plus organization, which is really the group of technology and operations women and their allies, the plus sign,
Mhm.
um, a symbol of allies and men and others, really promoting the cause for women and their careers and professions, both internally at Travelers and in our communities where we're very prominent among women and women of
Yes.
color. So those are just a couple of examples, Mary Fran.
Well, and I remember too, I don't know whether everyone had, with everyone staying home over the last year, you had a women who travel. it was another one of the groups that you were essentially the executive leader on within the company.
So that's actually our She Travels,
She Travels, that's
yeah,
right.
which is external, and that's actually at with our CEO and
Oh,
our
wonderful.
a few of our other leaders that across the board we're really creating Travelers is leading the way in defining the insurance industry as a much more inclusive place for women, and working hand in hand with our agents and brokers. And it's something that a couple of our other leaders, our chief marketing officer and Joan Woodward, who leads our Wednesday with Woodwards, and among many other things, and our Travelers Institute, she leads. So that's the program that they lead, but every one of our executives is a full supporter of that. And actually Empower Plus is, it's structured to fall underneath that umbrella, so to speak. And so that's the connection there.
Excellent, excellent. Well, my closing question for you, and this is about what this unexpected and very disruptive time over the last year and a half, what has it taught you as a leader that you didn't already know? And you've got a lot of experience as a leader already, but are there things that even surprised you that you learned over this past year?
Look, I'd say it didn't surprise me that I learned, because I know there is so much that I will have to learn. And I would say any leader that doesn't know that they still have a long way to go to learn, and they will always continue to learn, might be missing something. So it didn't surprise me that there was a lot that I could learn. I'd say one of the things that it highlighted for me was the power of listening, and really how much that drives empathy, and really, as you listen, taking that feedback and putting it into action.
Yes.
And so that's probably the one, I would say, thing that I learned, and really drove myself to practice more and more. And so in the beginning, as we all went home, I put in place these calls that we would invite all of the employees to, and I would share some information, but I would also then provide the ability and call them ask me anything, and
Yes.
so employees had the opportunity to ask questions. And so really listening to them when I didn't know the answer, and I can tell you there are many things I didn't know the answer to, I would very openly say it. And it was incredible that just with the power of just listening and making sure people knew that they had been heard, and then doing my best to go and get the answers where there were answers, made a difference. And so I'd say that's probably one of the biggest learnings, Mary Fran, and I will do my best to continue to
Yeah.
have that be part of how I operate as a leader.
Well, I remember hearing from you a while ago about how your CEO and other members of the senior management team were pretty much all demonstrating that, doing a lot of those AMA gatherings, Ask Me Anything.
Yeah, so I would say our CEO exemplifies, like what any leader could do. He was actually just yet again another year in a row top 100 Glassdoor CEO. So ranked by all of our employees. And there were weekly communications that he would personally. It was obvious that he had personally penned, and he is like one of the most incredible communicators, and truly being as open as possible to every single one of our 30,000 employees. And the reaction from the employees was just incredible. And so that was a practice that for months, every week on a Friday, the letter from Alan would come out. So these are just some of the powerful things that we saw demonstrated and all of us learned from.
That's great. That's great. Thank you so much for joining me today. I know how busy you are. I know all the people that want a chunk of your time. And it was wonderful having you here today as a guest on CIO Leadership Live. Thank you so much, Mojgan.
Mary Fran, thank you. And it was my privilege, and thanks for the opportunity to talk about Travelers and our great people and the great work that they do.
Awesome. If you joined us late today, you can watch the full episode later today right here on LinkedIn, but also on CIO.com and on YouTube's IDG Tech Talk channel. CIO Leadership Live is also available and will be available by tomorrow as an audio podcast wherever you get your podcasts. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation with Mojgan Lefebvre, the Chief Technology and Operations Officer at Travelers as much as I did, and that you'll come back for our next episode of Leadership Live on Wednesday, July 14th, again at noon Eastern, when I'll be joined by CIO Nicole Natowski, who is with the National Resident Matching Program, which takes care of all those graduating medical doctors across the U.S. and finds them great residency programs. Thanks again to Cisco for supporting this episode, and do take a moment to while you're on YouTube, to subscribe to our IDG Tech Talk channel, where you can find all of our previous shows. I keep talking them up as something everybody can binge, but I don't know if that's actually happening. Anyway, stay well and safe out in the world, and we will see you here again next time.